Nacra's fast. It's a challenge. It's a fitness, like a physical challenge, as well as a real technical class.
For me, it's kind of got everything I'd want an Olympic class to have. Knowing how to use your equipment and what settings to use, what fuel settings to use, is a big part of the challenge. But then also, the racing's really good. But it's a hard enough boat to sail that you need the skills to sail the boat to be able to race. I think it has everything.
A class that gives me a lot of adrenaline when we go out racing. Like you can have big days where you go out in the wind and waves in a foiling boat that's not really designed to sail in those kind of conditions, so it's kind of just a battle to get around the course, and I like that aspect of it. The whole Nacra fleet, the majority are male helm and female crew. I think when the boat first got introduced, people thought it would be the other way around, because they kind of just assumed that the more physical role would be suited to the men, but yeah, just the way it's panned out, there's more male helms and female crews. John would probably say this, that the girls are maybe better at multitasking, and you've got quite a lot going on at the front of the boat.
I am a bit of an older gentleman these days, so I'd say no. She genuinely is better at multitasking, and she's, I'd say one of her biggest skills is she's phenomenal at moving around the boat. Crew in Nacra literally does everything. They pull all the sails in, they're moving backwards and forwards, and they're trimming the foils. And our boat's particularly set up that Anna does everything. A big reason why I sail with Anna is because she's very tough and very fit and strong, quite injury-free. Out of all the people I sail with, I definitely say she's the toughest person, and when it gets hard on a full race day, she really can pull it together at the end of the day and keep going.
When I first started sailing the boat, I probably spent 6 months just really full on learning to sail the boat, and just every day in the gym trying to get to a level where I could actually do the role that was required and get through all of the training. That's the most important thing. For us, we just spend our whole time on the water, and then I just supplement that with doing weights in the gym and just a lot of cycling and other fitnessy bits. But we do a lot of our fitness actually on the water, because you can't really get more specific than that.
So we're here for Motivation Monday, and very lucky to have John Gimson and Anna Burnet joining me. Welcome.
Hi.
From a non-sunny day, unfortunately. It's a rainy day today, isn't it? But we've had some nice weather. So we've got a bit of intro video. Obviously, that was shot, I think was that a year ago, was it?
I think it's, about a year ago.
A lot has changed in that year. And congratulations. So not only have you been selected to go to Tokyo once, but twice as of the other day. So that's pretty exciting. So well done that. And we're here basically to have a conversation about pathway, how you've got yourself to this point, and kind of what's happened from here. So if you could introduce yourselves very briefly, that'd be fantastic. Don't mind who starts first, but go for it.
Well, it's easy. I'm John, and I sail in Nacra with Anna.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Cool.
That's
Okay. So basically, what we're trying to look at is how you got to this point, really. So where you started, what you did on the way. Now, I appreciate John's story might be slightly longer, we reckon, than Anna's story in terms of having done a few different bits and pieces. But what were the steps along the way? So, John, if you want to go for it first. So, how have you got from men?
You got. So I had a bit of a random pathway. So I grew up in Cheshire and started sailing at Rudyard Lake, which is a little lake in Staffordshire, and my first boat was a topper, but the club primarily sailed at that stage National 12s Enterprises, so I really wanted to sail a National 12. So I told my parents, right, I'm going to sail a National 12, and they're like, oh, it's a bit big, you should probably sail your topper. So in the end, they wouldn't buy one, so I said, right, I'll save up for one. So I drove a forklift every night after school on my little herb farm they had there, and saved up and brought my first kind of real boat that I was going to race, my National 12, for £600.
Nice.
I hadn't worked out who I was going to sail with, so we went down to the club. I don't know how it happened, but somehow I ended up sailing with a 50-year-old lady called Rosemary Mycock, which was the first kind of real stroke of luck I had with my sailing, because Rosemary sailed for the last, well, forever, and at the club, and she taught me, you know, a lot about how to race. And you know, I think I got a bit of a fast track in my early days sailing with someone who was older than me. And the other good thing with the 12 at Rudyard is I only ever really raced adults until I was about 16, and then we ended up doing the Northwest Junior Traveller Series, which had a handicap fleet at the time. I'm not sure if that still exists, but we won a few of those, and the RYA, there's a high performance manager at the time, suggested we should get into the 29er. So I teamed up with another guy from my club, and to be honest, we thought, you know, we're just two kids here that have only sailed at our local sailing club. But we got into a 29er and started finishing top 3. That was Sam Firkins, and we did a year together, I think, which was really cool. And Sam wanted to study a bit more, and I wanted to get more into sailing. And that year, I think the top 3 at every event was myself and Sam, Simon Martin Goody, and John Pink and Tom Weeks. And Sam and I came second at every single regatta. If it was windy, Simon won, so massive. And if it was light, Pinky won, because they were tiny, and we were kind of all right all round. So I think we always came second. And then, you know, Simon and I ended up teaming up, and Simon Marks crewed for me in the 29er. So the last year, and I think that was the first stage I realised that there was an Olympics, and where you could go with sailing. The lottery funding had come in by then. And I'd watched the 2000 Olympics, and I had thought originally I was going to be a sailmaker. And then I realised, well, maybe you could be a professional sailor. And they'd just started a development squad, and you had to be top 3 in the world then to get into the development squad. So I set that as a bit of a goal, and we had a really good year. We won the youth that year, and then we came second at the Worlds and the Europeans. So we were like, right, we've qualified for funding. And in a way, I think we were a bit on top of the world then, had no idea what was ahead of us, or me particularly. I was quite immature for my age. And in a way, I think I just thought, right, so now you qualify for the development squad, and then you go in that squad, and that just takes you through, and you go to the Olympics. And it was so far from what the actual reality was. You know, expectations were way too high. So I didn't even, you know, we didn't even have a plan of how we were going to do it. And I wanted to sell a 49er at the time, and I spoke to the manager of the development squad at the time, and he said, you need to see if you can get big enough. You're going to be too small. So Pinky and I spent 6 months. Basically, that's another story. I decided I wanted to go full-time sailing, so I knew I needed to be on the South Coast. So as soon as I finished my A-levels, I got in the car, drove down to Pinky's house, who lived in Hillhead, and just moved into, his parents let me move into the house, and we basically worked in that. They had a chandlery, worked in the chandlery every morning, and then sailed every afternoon. And to start with, we did that in Musto skiffs, hoping we could transition to the 49er and learn how to trapeze and helm. And we never really got big enough. And somehow at the end of that year, Pinky and I ended up teaming up in a 470, which was really stupid because I was about the size of a 470 skipper.
Right.
But they didn't have many 470s, so there was no younger team. So Pinky and I kind of took the younger team role on, and we just had a year and a half together, where I don't know if we learned a lot about sailing, but we had a really good time. You know, we were quite loose, and I don't think we really knew at all what campaigning was about. But in a way, I'd say that period was like most people going to university. You know, we partied pretty hard, to be honest, and we enjoyed life. We learned to windsurf and kite surf, and sailed in the afternoon, and worked in Machandra in the morning. But I think at the end of a year and a half, we both could see we were way too small for the boat, or I was way too small for the boat. And in terms of results, it wasn't going anywhere. But, you know, we did both learn a lot about life and being independent. So then I'd started doing a bit of keelboat sailing, and obviously I'd moved down on my own to the South Coast, so I didn't particularly have any money. Luckily, my parents gave me my 29er when I left home, So I'd sold that and brought half a Volvo with Pinky and half a 470. So, you know, budget was a big issue. And I kind of, we did Cal's Week on an ex-girlfriend of mine's dad's boat. And we managed to win Cal's. And I kind of realised that week when we were there, you know, I'd never seen this keelboat side of the sport, that there's a hell of a lot of money in it, you know, and there was a lot of people professional sailing. So I spent my next year basically full-time keelboat sailing, and, you know, learned the trade of that a bit. And at the end of that year, you know, I'd learned a lot about sailing with some more experienced older people, but also still had this big desire to go Olympic sailing. So by that stage, I'd got a bit bigger. I was 69 kilos. So I then did completely the wrong thing again and decided to helm a 470 just as I was about getting to crewing weight, and sailed with a couple of people, but ended up teaming up with Stu Biffle, who was just about big enough to be a 49er crew by then, and 10 kilos too heavy to be a 470 crew. So as you can imagine, we hammered in the breeze, and we were awful in the light. So, you know, if there was a windy qualifying, we'd qualify for Gold Fleet easily in the top 10, and then we'd just have a week of pain in light winds in the Gulf racing. And we managed about 6 or 8 months of that before realizing that, you know, the boat's sinking, we really are too big. And I don't know how we ended up, I think we got advised by Barry Edgington, actually, oh, you should maybe move into the Tornado. So the Tornado is my first stroke of bad luck with Olympic sailing. We did the Tornado for 1.5 years, and we were just about getting there in terms of, you know, we were getting top 15 at the odd regatta, and it took 1 year to learn how to sail a catamaran, and you know, it's a very different boat to what we've both sailed before. And at the end of that year, I think that was 2007, you know, I thought we had quite a good shot really for the next cycle, because the older guys were moving on, and we were, you know, the 470 would kind of learned to race, and we could start to put something together that remotely assembled an Olympic campaign. And then the Tornado got dropped from the Olympic classes, which was quite gutting. But you know, I was doing a lot of keelboat sailing at that time. Sorry if this is going on.
No, not at all, no, Karen.
A lot of keelboat sailing, and I've met a guy there who's been another person who's been a big part of it for me, a guy called Eamon Nolan. And I basically made a deal with him, or he made a deal with us, that he'd make up the excess budget for us if we sailed, you know, did some sailing with him. So he had a FAR 45, we did a couple of Meldrews all around the world. And the last year sailed Naturals with him. And because I was doing so much keelboat sailing, a Star seemed like a logical choice. So I teamed up with Ed Gregg, who was a Finn sailor at the time, who was at a similar stage to me, really. He was just about getting, you know, top 15, a top 10 on a good week. And we teamed up in the Star and basically gave ourselves the first 8 months to get onto performance funding at the time, which I think was, it had to be top 15, basically. And the Star fleet was really competitive with a lot of older, experienced guys. So it was quite a big ask, really. You know, some of the regattas had 100 boats that were going to be top 15 after only 8 months sailing. But really, budget-wise, although Eamon was making up the rest of it, it was an expensive program, and we couldn't really afford to do it without being in the performance program. And I think that, you know, that was a changing point in terms of how hard I had to work. So, you know, we pushed really hard, Ed and I, and had a really good year. And luckily we went to Miami for our first kind of period of training, and met a guy called Judd Smith, who designs a lot of sails for all the one design classes. He's won a lot of world championships in the Etchels and the J70s recently, and done America's Cups, but, you know, really talented sailmaker. And Judd, when we arrived in Miami, Judd saw we had no money and we were struggling. And he took us under his wing and said, okay, I'll give you guys sails if you come in tune with me. So that was great for Ed and I. And we worked with Judd, and we had Ian Barker as well coaching us. And we got reasonably quick. And by the time I think the Europeans came around, that was the event we had to do well in that year. We put a good series for us at the time together, and I think we scraped a 9th there in the 100 boat fleet. So, then I felt like, I'm actually starting to campaign, and we're getting there. And at the end of that year, the star got dropped from the games.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And also in that time, we've met Ian and Bart, and Perth said to us, we could be his tuning partner, which was, we'd kind of made a deal that we'd take the kit on after him and Bart retired, and we'd be able to learn from those guys how to campaign and, what to really do to make the next step. So we had a good program lined up, and we'd got the funding, because I think we'd got to a point with Eamon where he'd done all he'd wanted to in sailing, and he'd helped fund me for 4 or 5 years. So I had a really good last year of Eamon. Then we won the Extras Europeans and the Nationals and got a 4th at the World. So Eamon and I split ways then, just as we'd got onto the next level of funding to be able to start to do Olympic sailing more full time. So at that point, Ed stopped when the star got dropped, and I carried on sailing with a couple of different people, Anthony Shanks and Steve Milne, and purely to be Ian's tuning partner for the next couple of years in the star for the London Games. And that was the best decision I ever made in my life by far, because him and Bart were campaigning I remember the first time we went to a training camp, we're out sailing, and they've got a laptop in the boat with a sail scanner reading the sails. There's sensors all over the boat, and there's 3 people in the rib. There's a sail designer, Wang Garai, there's Wang K, the boat designer. We're at an America's Cup base in Valencia with access to a lot of people. And I realized at that moment the level of detail you really needed to be a gold medalist, and what they were actually doing. And that was the first real exposure I'd had to that level of the sport. And I think you can get to top 15 in Olympic sailing by being a good sailor if you get reasonable kit. But to make that extra bit, you have to really understand a lot of things about the boat and the technical side. You just have to know what the reaction on everything else is from changing something. And Ian and Bart really did understand that. So we worked, and also I thought Ed and I were working hard, nowhere near. With Ian and Bart, we got up every morning at 6:30, went to the gym, went to the coffee shop, made a plan for the day, sailed for 6-7 hours some days, tuning up wind, and then came back. People were looking at data, would go to the restaurant in the evening and go through everything that day, and finish at 10:30, and just did that solidly continually for their whole campaign. So that ended in 2012, and I got a really good opportunity then to join Artemis Racing, the America's Cup team. A Finn guy was going to do it, Andrew Mills, and he decided he was going to be a banker. And I'd obviously had a good tie with Ian, so Ian said, "Oh, why don't you come over? And we've got a job for a younger guy to come and help look after the AC-45s and do some sailing." So I was like, "Hell yeah, I'll do that." And I'd also at that time decided I was going to team up with Pippa Wilson, who'd won a gold in the Yingling in the Nacra. And I was going to crew the Nacra because we thought at that time it would be a physical boat, so you'd want to go at the front. So Pippa was doing a PhD at the time, and it worked quite well. Then I could be at Artemis and just fly back for the first year to do the regattas. And going to America's Cup then was, such a cool thing to do, and it seemed like the right thing at the time because the Cup boats were starting to foil, and the Nacras had curved foils. And I met a lot of people in that team who were really experts in their particular fields. And I also met Santi Langer, who won the gold in the Nacra in the end that cycle. But we built up quite a strong relationship. And Pippa and I did the first year kind of part-time, her at uni, me at Artemis, and then the second year full-time. And the second year we put, obviously her gold medal winning experience and my experience from the Cup and Ian and Bart together. And we had a really good year. We got a bronze at the test event. I think we were 5th at the Europeans and top 10 at the Worlds, and on track. And you know, Pippa's a phenomenal sailor, but at the end of that year, she decided for her it was time to move on, and she wanted to get married and have kids. So Pippa did that, and I was left at mid-cycle. I've got to start again.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a big call then what to do, because I really enjoyed the time with Artemis, and I'd left when we'd lost, you know, unfortunately, as you know, but Andrew Bart Simpson was killed there, and who was a very close friend of mine. And I'd left the team and focused on the Nacra after that, but Ian gave me an opportunity to go back. But I still felt then I really needed to go to the Olympics. And Ben Saxton and Hannah Diamond had stopped sailing together at the same time. So Hannah and I came up with a crazy plan that I'd switch back to helming and sail the Nacra, but we had a very limited time for me to learn that role because the Olympic trials had started. So we went to Miami that winter, and I kind of started to learn the role. But we had to perform by Palmer, which was 3 or 4 months later. It was the biggest event of the cycle in terms of fleet size for the Nacra, and it was the next event in the trials. And so I think I'm glad Hannah put the faith in me to do it, but we managed to get a second at that Princess Affair, and then a 5th in a World Cup in Weymouth, and a top 10 at the Worlds. But that qualified us for the test event in 2015, it would have been. And we had a bit of a shock at the test event. And a big lesson I learned there was, I think Hannah and I then tried to make life too easy for ourselves. We trained with some boats who weren't as good as us for that autumn. And the other British guys trained together. And then we basically lost the last 2 trials events. And that brought us to the start of this cycle. And I felt then I really had still this burning desire to do the Olympic sailing. And I kind of felt, well, right, I've started to medal at a few events now. And we'd gone from obviously bronze fleet with Pinky in the 470 to silver with Stu, to then starting to make the gold fleet, and then, you know, finally getting top 10s in some events in the Star, to a few medals here and there in the Nacra. So I thought, right, if I put everything together now, what I've learned from the Cup, what I've learned from each campaign, the year's keelboat sailing, and put all those lessons together, I think this time if I get someone to last the whole way, and you know, by that time I'd realised the boat didn't matter. I'd sailed every boat going. It was all about, you progress whatever you do, but it was all about the team. So I spent the whole of 2016 trying to find the right teammate and put the campaign together. And you know, that's the point where I met Anna, and yeah, well, you can go from there. Sorry about that, it's a bit of a ramble.
No, it's good. I mean, it's pretty amazing, really. Like, did you, like, you know, it's interesting. It's like you said there, like the general trend was always upwards. Like, you're always progressing. But obviously, some
at a slow rate, but always progressing.
Yeah, but then, you know, like when the Star got dropped and Tornado got dropped, did you ever think maybe this isn't going to happen, or you're just like, I'll find another way, or, you know, did you ever think about stopping and doing something else, or was it, no, I'm going to the games, just need to keep moving forward?
The only time I thought about stopping was when I stopped sailing the 470, because I started keelboat sailing then, and I realised that you could make a pretty good living from that. And I did for it, you know, I did a year of that, and at the end of the year I brought a house and other stuff. But it's not quite the same as, you know, I don't think you get the same feeling inside as you do Olympic sailing. And so I couldn't leave it. And then from then onwards, I've just known I need to do this. I've just been a bit of a slow learner, I guess, with a bit of bad luck, but it seems to be coming together now.
Yeah, but you know, all that experience has got you to here, isn't it? So that's the way to it. And Anna, how about you?
I can't really follow that.
Well, I think maybe more efficient, you know. So see how you think.
Traditional route, I guess. Started out in an oppie up in Scotland, and and so started racing in the oppie and just loved it. I just loved going sailing and going to the Scottish quads on the Isle of Cumbria, going away for the weekend without the parents and just going sailing with my friends. So I just absolutely loved sailing, and I really enjoyed sailing in Oppie, and then went from there, moved into the 420, and I started sailing with Flora Stewart, and Flora and I ended up sailing together for 7 years. So we did all of our 420, all of our time in youth together, and then into the 470. But we both went to university when we moved into the 470. So we did 3 years kind of part-time 470 sailing alongside university. And then, yeah, once we both finished uni, we did a year full-time, but kind of, and we were, yeah, that's the first time I actually had kind of any exposure to someone campaigning, a team campaigning at a much higher level, because Flora and I managed to get to do some training with Hannah and Sass as they were building up to the Rio Games. So that was my first kind of eye-opening experience of you know, of what was going on, and what was kind of required and how to campaign. And yeah, Hannah and Sass were really great. Like Sass made sure that she told us a lot. Well, we were learning a lot just about campaigning, about how they were running their campaign. But to be honest, I was too big to helm before 470, and so I wasn't really enjoying having to keep down to weight. I think between Flora and I Flora had a few injuries, and over the time we managed not to do that much sailing really through the university and in our 1 year full time. So I decided I didn't want to stay 470 helm weight anymore. So pulled the plug on that, had a little bit of time out from sailing, and then moved into the FX. And as soon as I got back into the FX, that gave me my love of sailing straight back. And I knew that was, at the time, I knew that was the boat that I really wanted to sail. And I felt it was helming the FX or crewing the FX. I did a bit of both in the year. I thought that was much more suited. The skiff was much more suited my skill set compared to helming the 470. So I really enjoyed that, and I did a year with 3 different people, both helming and crewing. And at the end of that year, I was back helming and sailing with Steph Orton, and we were having a really good time. And you know, we probably sailed together for about 3 months, just learning, you know, all the time. But the issue was Steph was still at university at the time, and I was full time and really wanting to push to try and get somewhere that cycle. It's kind of felt like the first time that I thought that I could, you know, I was learning enough that I could try and put a campaign together. In hindsight, I wouldn't have known anything and would never have managed to qualify in the FX. But that's when, yeah, John was looking for a Nacra crew and asked if I wanted to have a go. And I wasn't really that keen to sail a Nacra. I'd never sailed a catamaran, didn't know anything about them. I thought it was quite daunting actually, and John just kept saying all this technical stuff to me, and I had no idea what he was talking about. But that was quite daunting. But he was like, "Well, you're gonna have to learn this, so just start now." But yeah, I remember he called me up and said, you know, and I was saying, "Oh, I want to sail the FX. I'm not sure about the Nacra, but I haven't got anyone to sail with." And he said, "Well, it's more about the team than the boat you sail. So getting the team right is the main thing." And he was completely right about that. And yeah, I'm pretty glad I sailed the Nacra.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Like there's like sliding door moments, aren't they? Like if you could go for that, then yeah, that's the way to do it. And yeah. When, you know, going through that, when did you first think actually sailing the Olympics is what I want to do? Like when did that kind of trickle into your mind of that's the aim?
Well, I from when I was really young, I just wanted to go to the Olympics. A bit like Saskia Tidy was saying, we watched their interview. It didn't really matter what sport it was going to be in, and I was a really sporty child. You know, played loads of tennis and running and just anything. Was in doing all of the clubs, anything I could, and sailing was part of that. So I really just wanted to go to the Olympics, and it didn't matter what sport it was going to be in. Yeah, I'm glad I chose sailing because I'm not sure any of the other ones would have worked out.
Did you keep doing those other sports for quite a long time alongside sailing?
Yeah, I did tennis quite competitively until the point where I kind of had to choose between sailing and tennis for which one I wanted to do properly. And so I guess I was quite competitive. I was probably 10 or 11 years old when I was trying to decide which sport I wanted to do for the rest of my life to pursue. which seems a bit crazy to think about now, but that was genuinely my thought process. That I think my parents said you can't do both of these sports because it's kind of it's an every weekend type thing, so you need to pick one. And I remember thinking I didn't really like going sailing in Scotland in the winter. Like I didn't really like the being cold and wet side of it, but I was in the Scottish squad for sailing and only in the west of Scotland squad for tennis, so I thought my chances of being a professional sailor were higher than a professional tennis player. So luckily I made that call at 11.
That's a pretty, it's a pretty well laid out process at 11 years old, isn't it? Of what you're going to do. Wow. So actually, you reckon as young as like 10, 11 years old, you're like, right, I want to go to the Olympics and then I'm going to do it in sailing.
Yeah, I think that was it really. And yeah, it was lucky I went for sailing.
That's pretty cool. And you've both spoken about how important the team is, like getting the team right and almost like the boat comes second. How do you as a team work out what your kind of priorities are as you kind of go through and plan your training and all those bits and pieces?
So this campaign, I think we sat down really early on and we basically wanted to make a plan we did make a plan that took us from day one until where we are now, with targets along the way, like where we had to be. This year it was really important to last year win medals, and before that there's much more process driven targets. So we actually spent the first year of the campaign, or 9 months of the campaign, in Bermuda alongside Artemis Racing, sailing the Nacra 20s. But we're really fortunate that we could do that through Adam May and Percy helped us out a lot there, and did a little bit of work on the side there for them, just some recon. But we also had access to a lot. I think there were 7 gold medalists at Artemis at the time, so we kind of ran our plan by a lot of people, but basically made this plan where if you were going to ideally do a campaign, what you'd do, and did that on day one and stuck to it, which has made some hard moments along the way, but we've been quite ruthless about sticking to a plan.
Have you stuck to that plan all the way through, or have you tweaked it, or is it stayed pretty locked in?
Yeah, it's crazy. It was John's master plan, really. I didn't have the experience to be able to put something like that together. I didn't really understand what was quite required every year of the cycle, and because I hadn't been in a trials really before, and John had such close trials before, and just everything that went along with that. So we put this plan together. It was John's plan, but I was better on the computer, so I think I wrote it. And I don't think I really understood quite how important that was at the time. But just as the years have gone by, I've realised how religiously we've stuck to that and how important every part of that plan has been. And it's been completely fundamental to how we've got to where we are.
And how in terms of for both of you, if you kind of like pinpointed where your biggest learning came from as you went through all those, would you be able to do that, or is it a combination of all of it? What do you reckon helped you get here the most out of all the stuff you've done?
For me, that's it. Yeah, sailing with John. If John hadn't have asked me to try out in the Nacra and I hadn't had the opportunity to team up with him, then there's no way I wouldn't be going to this Olympics, and there's no way I'd know what I've learned now. I've just learned so much the last few years, from the extra 10 years of experience that he's got, and yeah, it's been amazing. And yeah, there's nothing I'd change about this campaign.
John?
I could pinpoint, I think you just meet, for me, it's been a long journey, and I've gone about some things really badly and a long way round, and I had a bit of bad luck. But from sailing all those different boats, and more than that, the people along the way, meeting Ian and Bart, meeting Judd Smith, and getting to sail with, some real legends of the sport. Paul Brotherton helped us, and Chips Howarth. I was lucky to have them at a youth level. They're 2 really good sailors of the time. But I think, there's been probably 10, 15 people along the way who have really influenced me, but in particular, Ian and Bart. So I'd say that the STAR programme is a turning point in knowing what it actually takes to start to win medals at this level of the sport.
Yeah, just that realisation of what the level really needs to be.
yeah, where the bar actually is. And I think it was easy to not know at the time to start with, because professional sailing had only really just started when I started. It was only one cycle ahead. So we were following, you know, Ian, Bart, Ben in a development squad, but not having really realised what they've been up to, what they've done. So when we finally did get to link in with that and see where the level had got to, it was, you know, you could see what 12 years of full-time sailing had done, for 15 years even for them had done, and, you know, where we really needed to get to if we wanted to win.
And, you know, like fast forwarding to where we are now, you guys have been through a really long and really tough selection process, and you've had this little double bounce of, you know, when COVID-19 came in, having to wait again to be selected again. Like, how have you know, you had your plan, you've done everything you can do. How do you manage, you know, how's that selection process been? How have you managed yourselves during that?
It's been stressful at times, but yeah, I think John had the experience of going through really tight trials in the last cycle. So, and I didn't really know what to expect. So from the first event of our Olympic trials, it's been a learning process for me. And yeah, at times it's been stressful, but I think we're pretty good at reading each other and knowing, you know, when one person is feeling stressed by the situation, or you know, or not wanting to take it on that day. I think we're very good at knowing how to pull each other through those through any of those times. And I think, yeah, the biggest thing was just having the strong team, and we've had the team to get through it. So with everything that was thrown at us through a very tough and tight Olympic trials, we've just kind of pulled above it and stayed really strong, and yeah, pretty proud of that.
You know, probably even more pressure than Olympic trials. We're going to have a challenge between the two of you. So we're going to have a bit of a quiz. So I've got some questions now, and they are mostly about Olympic sailing.
This could be awkward.
Now, I've been sent some questions, but I haven't been sent the. Oh no, have I been sent the answers? This makes me nervous. Okay, we sent some questions. Okay, so first one is a technical one about a Bearman windsurfer, and I'm pretty sure this is right because I researched this question myself. Okay, on the Nacra, or actually on any catamaran, there's only one rope on the boat that's called a rope. The rest are sheets and lines. What's the only rope on the boat that's called a rope?
Oh God.
Do you know, it's the bolt rope.
Oh, the bolt rope.
Oh, the bolt rope.
Go. That's just my only bit of kind of like really sort of like niche like boating. If you're on a bigger boat, you've got a bell rope as well, but basically the bolt rope's the only rope. Everything else is a sheet or a line. Okay, right. Number two. Okay, so it's all even so far. 0-0. We'll go hands up and we'll make it quick fire. Okay, when did multi-hulls first appear in the Olympics?
Oh, Jesus.
Go for a guess.
I feel like you should know
80s. Is it in the 80s?
You're going to go 80s, right, Anna? Go for it. Pick a guess.
I have no idea, so I'd go 80s too, obviously.
Okay, well, pick an Olympic year each. Only one of you right. I'll go closest wins. Okay, so you could have, if you're going for 80s, Seoul was 88, wasn't it? Then 84 was Los Angeles, 80 was Moscow, 76 was Montreal, I think. So there you go. There's a region. Which one are you going for?
I'll go for Montreal.
So 76. John, what are you going for?
84.
84. So Los Angeles, it was 76. Anna, 1-0. 1-0. Here we go. Okay, so in 76 then, which nation won the first Olympic multi-hull gold?
Was it us, Reg White?
It was, yeah. Great Britain. Yeah, there we go. 1-0. Okay, so this is it. We're going to go for the clincher. Okay, right. How many of the 15 sailors announced for the GB team at Tokyo 2020 are Scottish?
3.
Yeah, 3 or 4 if you include Ailey. So 3. But that was even. So I'm up to go for one more then. Right, when was the Nacra first introduced to the Olympics?
2016.
I think I'm going to have to get that to John. I think he just clinched it ahead of you, but that was pretty even. I think you can probably say you drew that team.
Equally
It's
bad.
a team effort. It's all about the team.
Team effort. So that you're finishing each other's sentences. That's a pretty good sign. Thank you very much for that and for your time. That's really, really interesting, that, of like the journeys and stuff you've been through. Congratulations again on getting the nod for a second time for Tokyo for next year. And yeah, hopefully when we get out of lockdown and get back on the water soon. What are your top tips for lockdown? How are you keeping yourselves busy?
I think we're joining the cycling team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of biking, yeah.
Biking. And yeah, well, for us, we're still trying to work as much as we can on our campaign. So just keeping busy with, John spends most of his days on the phone to people, sorting stuff out. I spend most of my time doing some kind of fitness, or actually baking. That's not true. I do quite a lot of baking as well.
Baking. Brilliant. Cracking. Well, thank you very much. That's great. Brilliant. Thank you.